When 100 years of darkness finally began to crack the first light that rose was human in the last century of war, the sky had forgotten the color of peace, and the earth had forgotten what it felt like to breathe without fear, yet humanity kept moving forward like a wounded traveler who refuses to stop because stopping would mean surrender, and surrender was a language we never learned. The conflict began so quietly that most people alive then never realized it would become a storm that would shape 100 years of history, and every heartbeat of our species a century, in which every birth was shadowed by the sound of distant battles, and every dream trembled under the weight of survival. The first wave arrived like a whisper that turned into thunder. Our early defenses burned against a force older than our earliest myths and stronger than our deepest hopes, but the human spirit is stubborn. It bends like iron heated in the fires of struggle, and the more pressure it feels, the stronger it becomes. Generations were born under red skies, children raised in underground shelters, elders who had seen entire continents scarred by conflicts that spread across planets and moons and stations orbiting forgotten stars. Yet even in the darkest hours, when the night stretched endlessly, the spark within us refused to fade. There came an era when the war consumed everything and humanity seemed to stand on its final ledge. Soldiers fought on barren worlds where the air tasted like dust, and sorrow pilots flew through burning voids where silence felt heavier than gravity. Explorers searched for allies among civilizations that feared to take a side, all while home felt more distant each passing year. But something indescribable lived in the hearts of humans, a fire lit by memory, by pain, by echoes of mothers calling their children home, by lovers waiting under fractured domes, by the stories of distant ancestors who had once survived their own impossible nights. And every time the war tried to take the last of us, we rose again like a stubborn sunrise. The century was filled with turning points, some victories small as a heartbeat, some losses vast enough to break a world entire, but the thread running through every moment was resilience, a force stronger than strategy and more eternal than fear. When the 40th year came, humanity had learned to fight with unity forged in shared suffering. When the 60th arrived, we had begun to understand our enemy not as a monster, but as a mirror of our own hunger for survival. When the 80th dawned, we had grown into something new, something ancient and newborn at the same time, our bodies shaped by hardship, our minds sharpened by grief, our will carved from centuries of defiance. But the final victory did not arrive through strength alone. It came because we remembered why we fought, not for conquest, not for dominance, but for the fragile threads that bind us, for the moments we treasure even when the universe tries to steal them away. The sound of a child laughing under a steel sky, the warmth of hands held during evacuation, the quiet promise we whisper to one another that tomorrow will be better even if today is burning. The last battle unfolded not in a single place but across the scattered scars of the galaxy, an orchestra of determination echoing from the cold outskirts of dying stars to the broken plains of planets that still remembered the first bombardments, and through that symphony humanity moved like a single breath, united, steady, and unyielding. There came a moment when the enemy faltered, not from fear, but from realization that the species they had tried to extinguish for generations would rather perish than surrender, and in that moment the tide turned like a long-forgotten promise finally kept. The battlefield fell silent for the first time in 100 years, and in that silence humanity stood wounded, trembling, exhausted, but undefeated. The stars that once watched us with indifference now shimmered with the reflection of our endurance. As the dawn rose over a world still scarred and trembling, people emerged from shelters like ghosts waking from a nightmare, their faces lit by the first sunrise of a future not shaped by war. For the first time in a century, children looked up and saw a sky that did not burn. Soldiers set down weapons that had grown heavy with the weight of generations, and elders whispered prayers of gratitude to the winds that carried the scent of peace. The century-long conflict had ended not with the roar of destruction, but with the quiet heartbeat of hope returning to life. And though the scars would remain carved into soil and memory, humanity knew one truth deeper than the wounds, deeper than the fear, deeper than the war itself. We survived because we refused to forget who we were, not conquerors, not monsters, not victims, but humans. Stubborn, luminous, fragile, powerful, infinite in our capacity to rise even when the universe tries to bury us. The final victory was not the defeat of an enemy, it was the rediscovery of ourselves. And as the new era began, humanity stepped forward carrying the memory of 100 years of struggle, like a lantern lighting the path into the unknown, whispering into the returning light that simple, eternal promise. We are still here. We are still alive. And we will never stop rising.